A nurse covers the body of a girl who arrived lifeless, but feels a breath near the girl's nose, and what she discovers next is moving. It was a cold dawn in Puebla, the kind that cuts through your skin, even though you are inside the hospital. The windows of the emergency room were always fogged up due to the contrast between the freezing air outside and the little heat inside. The clock read 3:47 in the morning. Almost no one spoke. Only the footsteps in the hallway could be heard, the coffee machine making noise from time to time, and the silence of those who would never return. Mary Torres, 52 years old, had seen it all in almost 3 decades as a nurse, but there was something about that night that moved her in a different way. Perhaps it was the way the girl arrived, wrapped in a torn sheet, carried by 2 paramedics who didn't even dare to look her in the eyes. Perhaps it was the girl's age, or the smell. A strong smell of dirt, sweat, and neglect. A smell that did not belong to a girl. The girl must have been about 7, maybe 8. Her skin was cold and sticky. Her hair was tangled and looked greasy, as if it had not been washed in weeks, as if no one had touched her in a long time. Her nails were dirty. Her clothes were wet with dried urine and stained with dirt. She had no identification, no backpack, no documents, nothing. Just a pair of small, very worn sneakers, as if they had already been worn by many feet before hers. The doctor on duty, tired and in a hurry, examined her, shook her head slowly, filled out the paperwork, and in a low voice said what no one wants to hear. Time of death, 2:48. Probable untreated pneumonia, severe infection. The heart had stopped. Mary just nodded. She took the white sheet with steady hands, but her heart was in chaos. She hated that moment. Caring for someone after life had already left them was the hardest part of being on call, even more so when it was a child. She approached slowly. The girl had a thin face, sunken cheeks. She had a tiny mole near her left eye, and for a second Mary felt a tightness in her chest. She remembered something, someone, but immediately shook off the thought. Carefully, she began to cover the body. First the feet, then the cold little hands with fingers twisted, as if they had shrunk in fear. Then the torso. She took a deep breath before covering the face. "Rest now, my child," she murmured in a whisper that no one heard. And then, with the sheet in her hands, ready to cover the last bit of that forgotten girl's face, Mary froze. Something strange, very strange. Mary frowned, narrowed her eyes, and the girl's eyelids moved slightly. Almost nothing, but they moved as if deep inside she was dreaming. It was subtle, but clear, a tiny tremor, like that of someone dreaming with fear or nostalgia. Mary's heart leapt, and she even blinked, thinking it was all in her head, an illusion, fatigue. After all, she was exhausted. A heavy guard duty, a cold dawn, little food in her stomach. It could be that. It must be that. But then came a very soft sound, like a click. She held the sheet in the air, her gaze fixed on the girl's face. The sound seemed to come from her chest, a muffled crackle, then silence, long, heavy, and then something happened that no one expected. A sigh, almost nothing, almost a whisper, but it came. Mary didn't move. The sheet still floated in the air, trapped between her fingers. Her eyes filled with tears without her realizing it. Her whole body froze. It wasn't possible. She knew death. She knew what it was like. She knew when it came. She knew when it was final. Oh, she thought she knew. The sheet fell from her hand. Her breathing became short, trapped. She took a step back, then another forward, in a confused coming and going of someone who doesn't know what to do. She wanted to call someone, but the voice wouldn't come out. She could only say in a whisper, "My God, my holy God." She looked at the girl's chest, waited, counted in her mind. 1, 2, another sigh. Mary felt her legs shaking. It was real. It was true. The girl was there. She had life, even if it was minimal, even if it was hidden. She had life. The world stopped for a moment. There was no longer a clock, no noise in the hallway, no guard, nothing. Only that small body, so mistreated, so alone, and yet, breathing. Mary put her hand on the girl's face. It was cold, but not icy like before. She put her ear to her chest, almost breathless, almost afraid of hearing nothing. but she heard a faint, unsteady sound, but it was there. She stood, paralyzed. Tears now flowed freely, without sorrow, without control. The body she was going to cover was not dead. There it was. The girl's face was visible again, her eyes closed, her expression calm, but her chest was moving. It was not an illusion. It was not empty hope. It was movement, an almost invisible, but constant rising and falling, breathing. "Holy Mary," Mary whispered in a thin voice. Her eyes filled with tears. Once again she placed her hand on the girl's chest. She felt the skin, cold but alive. Then despair overwhelmed her. She turned abruptly, shouting down the hallway, "Help! Help here! She's alive! For the love of God!" Her voice came out shaky, loud, almost broken. She had never screamed like that in the hospital. But this was not just any emergency. This was a miracle. The seconds seemed like hours. Mary kept her hand on the girl's chest, as if that could keep life there, as if the warmth of her touch would help that little lung to keep going. Her eyes fixed on the girl's face, looking for any other sign. Her skin was still cold, but it seemed less stiff. There was a breath there, a tiny force fighting not to leave. Then the door burst open. Quick footsteps. The doctor on duty, Dr. Lords, came in, confused. "What happened? She's breathing. She's breathing, doctor." Mary pointed, her hand still on the girl's chest. "I heard it. I saw it. She's here. She came back." The doctor ran to the stretcher, gently pushed Mary aside, took the stethoscope, listened, then put her fingers on the girl's neck. Her face changed. She became serious, concentrated, like someone trying to understand the impossible. "There's a weak pulse, but there is one," she murmured. "My God." Mary put her hands to her mouth. "Mary, call the team now. Say it's a pediatric code red. She's alive." Mary ran to the phone, trembling, almost tripping over her own feet. She dialed, alerted them while the doctor began to prepare for intubation. In the corner of the room, a tear rolled down the nurse's face. Not of sadness, but of relief, of fear, of faith. Because on that shift, on that lonely shift, she saw something she had never seen before. A body that had already been given up for dead. A sheet that already covered the end. Dr. Lords, her hair pulled back haphazardly and gloves on her hands, gave short, firm orders. The nurses followed each instruction carefully. They intubated the girl as gently as possible. Her breathing began to be assisted by machines. Her chest now moved with the help of a machine. The sound of oxygen flowing in and out filled the room like tense music, but full of hope. "She's very unstable," Dr. Lords murmured, almost to herself. "Low frequency, changing saturation, but she's here." Mary took a deep breath. Her heart was still beating wildly. She slowly approached the stretcher, afraid of getting in the way, but unable to stay away. She stood next to the bed and looked at that silent, helpless face, now with a tube between her lips surrounded by wires. Still, it was the same face, the same girl she had thought was gone. "What do you think happened to her?" Mary asked in a low, almost whispering tone. Dr. Lords finished checking one of the monitors and replied without taking her eyes off the screen. "I can't say for sure, but this looks like a deep catatonic state." "Catatonic," Mary repeated, not quite understanding. "It's a type of neurological block, as if the body goes into defense mode, an extreme form of protection, almost as if it shuts down so it doesn't feel anything else. It's very rare in children, but it can happen in cases of severe trauma, physical or emotional." Mary remained silent. Her gaze was lost in the girl's expression. It was hard to imagine that such a small, fragile body could have gone through something capable of shutting down the soul itself. She pulled up a chair, sat down next to the bed, and gently took the girl's little hand. It was cold, her fingers thin, her skin like paper, but her pulse was weak. Yes, but weak. But she squeezed it lovingly, gently, almost like a touch of presence. "I'm here." "Yes," she said softly. "I'm here, my flower. You're not alone." The doctor glanced at her and said nothing. There was no need. Time seemed to stand still in there. Mary stayed holding that little hand for several minutes without saying anything, just feeling something she couldn't explain. A warmth in her chest, a lump in her throat, and a great need to protect that girl with her own life if necessary. There was something about that girl, something that touched a place that Mary thought had been closed for years. It was as if, even unconscious, even so weak, the girl was saying, "Don't give up on me." And in that instant, Mary knew she would not give up, no matter what. Later, with the girl stabilized in the pediatric ICU, Mary entered the room with a change of clean clothes in her hands. They were small items of clothing donated by other mothers of hospitalized children, a pair of soft cotton pants, a faded pink t-shirt, socks, all simple, but clean, dry, smelling of soap, something that gives warmth, that embraces. She approached the bed slowly, her heart still heavy, but now wrapped in a layer of hope. The girl was there, still intubated, still silent, but alive as she could be. Mary moved the sheets to one side and began to carefully remove the dirty clothes that were still on her body. The sleeves stuck to her thin skin, the cuffs stained with old dirt. A strong smell still coming from those fabrics, a smell of abandonment, of the street, of cold. She went slowly, as if afraid of hurting more than that girl had already been hurt by life. And when she reached her feet, she saw the sneakers, 2 sizes too small, unbranded, full of dry dirt on the soles, the outer fabric torn in one corner. The lace on one of them had been replaced by a piece of rope. Mary bent down, placed one of the sneakers on her lap, and began to remove it. When she slowly pulled out the worn insole, she saw something that made her stop. There, in blue pen, faded by time and use, was written a name, shaky, almost erased. Gabriella R. She read it aloud, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Gabriella. R looked at the other sneaker, and there it was again, the same misspelled name, as if it had been scribbled by a hurried hand or by someone who wasn't sure if it would do any good. Mary felt a lump in her throat. It was the only sign of that girl's identity. No documents, no bracelet, nothing in her pockets, no backpack, just that. A misspelled name on the insole of an old sneaker. She grabbed the 2 sneakers in her hands, pressed them against her lap, and stayed like that for a while, looking at them and thinking about everything that could be behind that name. Who wrote it? The girl herself, her mother, someone afraid of losing her, someone who had nothing but still tried to make sure that if she disappeared, at least they would know her name. Mary looked up at Gabriella. Yes, now she had a name, and names are important. They give identity, they give existence. The girl was Gabriella, and that changed everything. She took a deep breath, wiped away a tear that had slipped out unintentionally, and spoke softly, as if making a promise. Gabriella, now you are no longer alone. I found you. And in that instant, that scribbled name became an anchor, a thread connecting her to the life that Gabriella had almost lost. And Mary knew right then and there that she would do everything in her power and to find out who was behind that R. Because no child should enter a hospital as a nameless body and leave as just another number. No, Gabriella was someone, and now she had someone who saw that. The next morning, the hospital corridor continued with its routine of quick footsteps, muffled voices, and that ever-tense atmosphere of those who live with the thin line between life and death. But in that area, the atmosphere was different, a distinct silence, almost respectful, as if everyone knew, even though they didn't, that something incredible had happened there hours before. Gabriella was still intubated, unconscious. The machines flickered beside her, weak but constant signals. The fight continued. Mary, who never left the girl's side, felt as if a part of her had also been intubated that morning. She was completely there. With the name wound on the tennis shoe, the hospital finally registered the case in the government system. They notified social services, filled out forms, called the National Missing Persons Registry, followed all protocols to the letter, but the response was a heavy silence. Nothing. No record under the name Gabriella R. No report of disappearance. No child with that name reported. No school that recognized her. No relatives looking for her. No calls. The phone rang. Emails were sent, but it was as if Gabriella did not exist, as if she had come out of nowhere, as if she had been forgotten by everyone. Hours later, 2 police officers arrived, a man and a woman, worn uniforms, folders in their hands, tired expressions. Mary took them to the file room, explained everything, every detail, her voice breaking, hoping for some kind of urgent reaction. But what came was a cold, bureaucratic look and a phrase that fell like a stone, probably homeless. Mary opened her eyes wide, did not respond immediately, just took a deep breath as if holding back a scream, as if probably indifferent. She's about 7 years old. She has a name written on her sneaker. Someone wrote that. Someone cared. The police officer shrugged his shoulders. "Come on in, ma'am. Abandoned children sometimes don't even have a birth certificate. The mother could have used a false name at the time of delivery. Sometimes they are the children of people living on the streets. It's not uncommon." The police officer next to her finished without emotion. "We'll open a report, but without clues, without DNA, without anyone looking for her. It's going to be difficult." Mary didn't respond. She just looked at them for a while. Their coldness was a cruel contrast to what she had experienced there in that room. They saw numbers, statistics. She saw a girl struggling to breathe, a girl who came back from death, who was crying inside, even without opening her eyes. After the police left, Mary went back to the room, sat down next to Gabriella's bed, and took her little hand again. "They think you're nobody," she whispered with teary eyes. "But I do see you, my child. I do see you." And she sat there in silence, her hand clutching the girl's, as if to say without words, "As long as I'm here, you won't be invisible." The pain of seeing a child forgotten by everyone is indescribable. But Mary decided, right then and there, that this story was not going to end like this, even if she had to move the world on her own. The afternoon was slowly falling in Puebla. The sunlight streamed through the high window of the ICU, passing through the glass and touching the sheets with an almost golden glow. The area was quieter than usual. The nurses spoke softly. The monitors beeped in an almost hypnotic rhythm, and time seemed to move more slowly in there. Mary had already finished her shift, but she didn't leave. She couldn't. Her body may have been tired, but her heart no longer had rest. She sat down again next to Gabriella's bed, pulled the chair close as if visiting a family member. She took the little girl's hand again. It was now an automatic gesture, as natural as breathing. She sat there quietly, looking at the girl's face, her skin still pale, her eyes closed, the breathing tube taped to the corner of her mouth, the sound of mechanical breathing filling the room. Each artificial breath was a battle won. Mary knew it. She wasn't expecting anything. No sign, no miracle, no improvement. She just wanted to be there, to be present, to believe that somehow Gabriella felt she wasn't alone. And it was, at that moment, between one breath and another, what happened. Mary was looking directly at the girl's face when she saw her eyelashes move. First it was a slight tremor, a brief spasm. Then the eyelid lifted just a little. Not enough to reveal the eye, but enough to make it clear. She was there. Somewhere inside, Gabriella was still there. And then came what Mary never expected. A slow, silent, solitary tear rolled down the corner of the girl's left eye, crossed her pale cheek, and was lost in the white sheet. Just one, a single tear, but it was enough to break Mary inside. She put her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the tears, but she couldn't. The emotion came like an avalanche. She leaned on her knees, lowered her head, and let the tears fall. Not from sadness. It was more than that. It was a mixture of pain, relief, hope, and a compassion so deep that it hurt in her stomach. She leaned over, rested her forehead on the girl's hand, and said softly, "I saw, my love. I saw that you cried. I'm here. I won't leave you. Yes, I promise." Gabriella's tear was a silent scream. It was as if her body was saying what her mouth could not, as if that single drop of salt was saying, "I feel, I hear, I am here." And in that silent ICU, among wires, machines, and promises spoken in whispers, a strong, inexplicable bond was born. A girl who cried without opening her eyes, and a woman who cried because she understood every millimeter of that tear. The clock read 10:17 in the morning when the phone rang at the hospital reception desk. It was just another day, at least for those passing through the hallways. But for Mary, nothing had been normal since Gabriella arrived. She was in the records room reviewing the notes from the previous shift when one of the receptionists, with the phone still to her ear, called her with a worried look. "Nurse Mary, I think it's for you. There's a woman on the line talking about the girl." Mary got up immediately, her heart racing, picked up the phone, and spoke calmly, trying to hide her distress. "Well, who is this?" On the other end, a low, trembling female voice spoke, and the phrase that came out made Mary freeze. "Please, the girl's name is Gabriella." That was it. Exactly. No beating around the bush, no hesitation. Mary froze. Her breath caught in her chest. The name that no one knew, that wasn't in any registry. The name written in a hurry on the insole of the sneaker. The woman on the other end knew it. "Who are you?" Mary tried to stay calm. "How do you know her name?" But the call started to fail. A strange noise, as if she were in a place without good reception. Crackling, interference. The woman's voice faded away. Mary tried to insist. "Well, ma'am, can you hear me?" Silence. Then a sharp click. It cut off. Mary held the phone to her ear for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. She tried to call back, but it didn't go through. The screen just showed a connection error. She went to the receptionist and asked for the number's details. It was a prepaid cell phone with no identification in the system. Not even the country could be determined with certainty. Returning to the room, Mary sat down and stared into space. How did she know? The question kept running through her head. How did that woman know the name Gabriella, if even the hospital hadn't disclosed it? She got up and walked to the room where Gabriella was still intubated. The girl was the same, fragile, quiet. Mary sat down in her usual chair, took out the girl's sneakers that she had kept in a clean bag next to her, and looked again at the insole. The name there, Gabriella R., written in a hurry, in uncertain handwriting. "It was you," she whispered, looking at the girl. Was it you who wrote that name? Or was it that woman on the phone? Could it be her mother? Her sister? Someone who knew her and was afraid to come forward? 1,000 questions came to mind, but no answers. Only one thing Mary knew. Someone out there knew who Gabriella was, and for some reason couldn't or didn't want to be found. But now, the silence was no longer complete. The line was drawn, and Mary knew that somehow this story still had much to reveal. That call was stuck in everyone's head, both Mary's and Dr. Lord's. The two of them kept repeating that name over and over. Gabriella. The tone of the woman on the other end of the line, the anguish in her voice, was impossible to ignore. At the end of the afternoon, when the hospital had calmed down a bit, Dr. Lords called Mary to talk. "We're going to try to search the state system by name and age. Even if she doesn't have any documents, maybe some old records will come up." Mary nodded, her eyes full of expectation. Any clue was a step forward. The doctor went to the computer and typed in Gabriella R., age range between 6 and 8 years old. State of Puebla. It took a few minutes. The system was slow and old, but suddenly it appeared. Here is Gabriella Ramirez, 7 years old. She was admitted to a health center 5 months ago in the southern part of the city. There is no photo, but a name appears. Carla Ramirez. Companion. Mary approached and read the file carefully. The reason for the visit field said only, panic attack, shortness of breath. The care was incomplete, and a note in red at the end caught her attention. Patient left before the consultation. "She left before being seen," said the doctor, frowning. "And she didn't come back," Mary added in a whisper. "It may have been the last time she sought help." "That center is near the old bus station," said the doctor. "It's a very poor area. Many vulnerable people pass through there." Mary looked at the file again. The woman's name spun around in her head like an echo. Carla Ramirez. Who was she? Why did she bring her daughter to the center and leave without being seen? She was running away from something. She was afraid of losing the girl. Or she was so lost that she couldn't even ask for help properly. She couldn't sit still. "I'm going to that center. I need to talk to someone there. I'll take a photo of the girl. Maybe someone will remember them." The doctor looked at her and just nodded. At dusk, Mary took a bus and headed for the health center in the southern part of the city. She got off 2 blocks early and walked, observing everything with an attentive gaze. The area was simple, with poorly lit streets, small houses, and a silence that made the air heavier. She arrived at the center, which was almost empty at that hour. She knocked on the side door, and a young nurse, tired but polite, answered. Mary showed him the printed file and the photo of the girl. She explained the situation carefully, without exaggerating, but with firmness. The young man looked at the paper for a few seconds, then frowned. "I think I do remember, mother and daughter. She seemed very nervous. She was shaking. She told me that the girl was having crises, crying about everything, hiding. I asked her to wait a moment. There was a line, and she sat there for about 20 minutes. Then she suddenly got up and left. I ran after her. I asked her if she needed help, but she just shook her head and said, 'For God's sake, don't involve social services.'" Mary stood there listening to every word as if they were knives piercing her heart. "She said that?" she asked. The nurse nodded with an expression that showed he too was carrying a heavy burden. He said, "I know I'm wrong, but I can't lose her. She's all I have." The girl said nothing. She was clinging to her, her 2 eyes wide open, a heavy silence. It was as if the girl had already seen too much. Mary looked down, feeling her throat close up. The image of Gabriella, intubated, fragile, in that bed, was now mixed with this new memory. A quiet girl in a center clinging to her mother, looking at everything with fear. The nurse added, "The form you filled out was all wrong. Incomplete name. The address didn't match anything. I was going to correct it later, but since she disappeared, it ended up staying that way. She left out of nowhere, without even looking back." Mary stood there in silence. The world around her seemed dull. Everything was spinning slowly. She leaned against the wall and took a deep breath, trying to hold back what wanted to come out of her, her eyes. She just didn't want to lose her daughter. She whispered more to herself than to anyone else. And at that moment, she understood more than ever that behind all that mess, that poorly filled out form, all that fear, there was a mother trying to protect what she had left. Perhaps without strength, perhaps without means, but with love. A wounded, desperate love, but still love. And that was what squeezed Mary's heart all at once, because for the first time, she stopped seeing Gabriella only as a patient. Now she saw a story, a past, and a pain that came from far away. Mary was already exhausted. She didn't even know how many hours she had been awake. She urgently needed rest and left, her head full. But when she lay down in bed, she passed out. It was morning. The hospital hallway was just beginning to stir, and Mary was passing by the reception desk when she heard the insistent ringing and saw the receptionist look up, startled, calling her with her hands. Their eyes met, and without saying a word, Mary knew. She walked up to the counter. She picked up the phone with steady hands, but her heart felt like it was going to jump out of her mouth. "Hello." On the other end, silence. A low noise. Then the voice. "She's alive, right? The girl, please. She's alive." It was the same voice from the previous call. Mary recognized it instantly, that trembling, uncertain tone, laden with fear. "Yes, she's alive. She's fighting, but she's here with us," Mary replied slowly, as if speaking to a wounded soul. The woman took a deep breath. On the other end, she could hear the commotion of the place where she was. People talking, car horns, a radio in the distance. "Please don't leave her alone. Please don't leave her alone." The voice came lower, almost breaking. It was pleading, desperate. Mary tried to get closer. "Are you family? What is your name?" "I'm her mother." Silence. "Help me help her. Tell me who she is. Tell me where she is." But before any answer came, the call was cut off again. Mary held the phone to her ear, waiting for a miracle, but nothing. She tried to call back, but the number was out of service. She tried again. Nothing. She put the phone down on the counter, closed her eyes for a second, breathing heavily, the weight on her chest heavier than ever. She walked slowly back to the pediatric ward. She passed through the service corridor where one of the hospital's longest-serving cleaners, Doña Tere, was sweeping the floor with her worn broom. "Everything okay, Mary?" she asked with that look of someone who always notices more than she should. Mary hesitated, but decided to tell her. The same woman called again. She knew the girl's name, but she wouldn't say who she was. She just asked not to be left alone. Doña Tere stopped sweeping, stood there thoughtfully, and said in a low voice, "I didn't want to say anything, but I think I've seen that girl before. She doesn't seem unknown to me." Mary turned around instantly. "What do you mean you've seen her?" "Well, she does look a lot like a girl I sometimes see in the square, over by the bus station. A skinny girl with her hair always tied back with a scarf. She looks scared, always wearing a big coat. She sleeps there sometimes, sitting on a bench with her head down. She never talks to anyone, but she's always looking at the ground as if she's afraid to look people in the eyes." Mary's eyes widened. Her heart raced. "Are you serious?" "Yes. I haven't seen her in a few weeks. That's why I think it might be her, but I'm not sure. I don't want to get involved where I shouldn't, either." Mary didn't think twice, took the bag, said she would be gone for an hour, and went straight to the square 3 blocks from the bus station. The place was simple, with concrete benches, a few crooked trees, a kiosk in the center, and lots of people rushing by without looking around. But Mary walked slowly, her eyes alert, sitting down, standing up, observing every corner, every person, nothing. She passed a man lying on a piece of cardboard, a woman selling candy, 3 teenagers with old backpacks. But no one with the face of the woman from the call sat down on a bench, looked around, and stayed there waiting until evening came and it began to get dark, because now she knew whoever that woman was nearby, and maybe had just needed a little time, courage, or love. Mary went back there again, 3rd day in a row, always at the same time. She sat on the same bench, observing, waiting. She knew the woman was going to show up. She felt it in her heart. And sometimes your heart feels things before your mind understands them. And that afternoon she saw her there, at the back of the square. Near the broken drinking fountain, there was a woman sitting on a stone bench, her body hunched over, an old coat covering her arms, which were too thin, a scarf tied around her hair, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking, as if she were holding back tears, or the cold, or both. Mary recognized her immediately. It was her. Her heart began to beat fast, but she didn't run. She walked slowly, as if afraid of scaring her away, each step careful, as if treading on glass. She stopped about 2 meters away. The woman didn't lift her face, but her breathing became faster. Mary noticed. "It's you, isn't it?" Mary said softly. The woman slowly raised her eyes, and there they were, sunken, tired, but alive. "I tried to call," the woman murmured, her voice breaking, "but I couldn't speak properly." Mary sat down next to her, slowly, without invading her space. "Are you Carla?" She didn't answer. She just started crying. "I just want to know." Carla shook her head, her hands clenched in her lap. "Did she really survive?" Mary didn't answer right away. She slowly took one of her hands. It was cold, shaking. She squeezed it lovingly. "She's alive. Yes, she's alive. She's struggling, but she's here." Carla covered her face with both hands and cried. She cried like a frightened child. Her shoulders shook. Her chest rose and fell uncontrollably. It was a stifled cry, full of guilt, pain, and nostalgia. A cry that asked for no comfort, only permission to exist. Mary stayed there, didn't ask any questions, didn't press her, just held her hand and let her cry. After a while, Carla managed to whisper, "I thought she was dead. I looked for her. I ran everywhere, but no one could tell me. I thought she was dead." "Calm down," Mary said softly. "You did what you could, and now you're here. That's what matters." Carla shook her head in despair. "I let her go. I failed. I shouldn't have. I just wanted to protect her. I swear. I just wanted to protect her." Mary looked at her with eyes full of tears. She saw before her not an irresponsible woman, not a mother who ran away, but someone exhausted who carried the world on her shoulders and who, deep down, just needed a chance to love well. So come firmly. Come see her. Stay close. Stay with your daughter. Carla opened her eyes wide, her mouth trembling. "You're leaving me. I'm no one to stop you, but I know when someone still loves, and you love her. That's clear." And on that bench in the square, 2 broken women met. One had lost everything. The other was rediscovering herself for the first time in years. And in the middle of it all, a little girl named Gabriella, who was still breathing, because love, even when it fails, can have the power to save. The walk back to the hospital was silent. Mary and Carla walked side by side with slow steps. The sky was beginning to darken, bringing that sad blue of the end of the day. Carla walked with her eyes downcast, as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Mary said nothing. She felt that it was not a time to talk. It was a time to listen. They sat down on a bench in the courtyard beside the hospital. The movement inside continued, with stretchers passing by, people arriving, voices on the radio. But outside, it was just the two of them. Carla took a deep breath, rested her elbows on her knees, looked at the ground, and began to speak softly, shakily. I worked in a beauty salon. It wasn't big, but it was enough to pay the rent and buy food. It was just me and Gabriella. It was always just the two of us. Mary listened to her attentively, her gaze fixed on her. When the owner sold the salon, I was fired. I looked for work, but no one wanted to hire a single mother with a little girl. The money ran out, and one day the owner of the room where we lived kicked us out overnight with our things on the sidewalk. She paused, her eyes already filled with tears. I slept with Gabby at the bus station for a few nights, then in the square. I fed her as best I could, but she started coughing. First it was mild, then strong, with fever and red eyes. I panicked. Mary already felt a lump in her throat. I picked her up and ran to the nearest hospital, but on the way I fell. I fell completely. I fainted. I don't remember anything else. She covered her face with her hands, her voice broken. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground, and she was gone. I searched the streets, asked the ambulance, the people who were passing by. No one knew. No one had seen her. I thought she was dead, that they had taken her body away, that no one was going to tell me because I was nobody, you know? I didn't have an address or valid documents. I thought she had died, and that it was all my fault. Mary felt the tears running down her face. Carla looked at her with red eyes. I didn't have the courage to go back. I failed. I left her. She hates me for that, right? Mary didn't answer. She just slowly reached out and held her hand. They stayed like that for a while, silent, hands clasped. And in that silence, Mary said everything Carla needed to hear, because sometimes forgiveness doesn't come with words. It comes with presence, with a simple gesture, with someone who stays, who doesn't turn their back. Carla cried silently. She cried like someone who breaks down after trying to be strong for a long time. And Mary just held her, as if to say, "You still have a chance." The two of them went back into the hospital. Mary asked for a moment before taking her to the pediatric ward. She wanted Carla to breathe, to settle down inside, because it was all too much, too recent, too fragile. Then they went up together to a small support room with an old armchair and a thermos of coffee on the table. Carla sat down slowly. Her body felt weak, but it wasn't physical fatigue. It was another kind of fatigue, deeper, older. Mary pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. She remained silent, waiting until Carla began. "I got sick after Gabriella was born." Her voice was soft but firm, like someone who had decided she could no longer hide anything. "I loved my daughter from the first day, but my head wasn't right. I cried for no reason. I felt guilty about everything. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to do it, that I was a lie, that she deserved a better mom." Mary listened with a heavy heart. She had seen many similar cases, but when it was said like that, so raw, so human, it hurt differently. I tried to ask for help, but no one understood. They said I was exaggerating, that it was just exhaustion, that all moms go through that, but it wasn't that. It was a hole inside me, an emptiness, a sadness stuck to my skin. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket. She continued, "I distanced myself from the few people I had. They judged me for everything, for the way I cared for her, for the way I spoke to her, even for being alone. And then I started to fail at the little things, then the big things, until everything fell apart." She paused for a long time, her breathing shaky. "When they kicked me out of the room, I felt like the world was confirming what I already thought, that I was useless, that I was a burden. I just wanted I just wanted her to be okay, even if it was far away from me, even if I disappeared. Mary held back her tears. It hurt too much. Hearing a mother say she thought about disappearing because she believed her daughter would be better off without her. But she wouldn't be okay without you, Carla. She never would be, Mary said at last. Carla just closed her eyes. More tears fell. I failed so many times. Mary leaned over and held her hands tightly. You tried alone, with no one, and you're here now. No matter how many times you fell, you came back, and that's courage. Carla looked at her with eyes full of tears, but for the first time, they were less empty. Do you think she can forgive me? Mary squeezed her hands tighter. I think she is still waiting for you. And in that moment, between two tired women, a new thread was born. One of listening, of acceptance, of hope. Because sometimes all someone needs is for another person to say, I believe in you. This way, said Mary, almost in a whisper, as if guiding a secret. They climbed 2 flights of stairs until they reached the intensive care unit. Mary opened a discreet door without making a sound. The hallways were empty, bathed in a soft, yellow light. The monitors beeped softly and steadily. The smell of alcohol in the air seemed stronger at that hour. Carla walked slowly, as if she were walking on glass, her eyes already filled with tears, her mouth trembling. Mary stopped a few feet from the room and pointed. There it is. Carla stood still for a second, as if she didn't know whether to go forward, but her feet carried her on their own. When she reached the glass door, she looked inside, and there was Gabriella, lying there, intubated, fragile, surrounded by cables and machines, but still her. Carla rested her forehead against the glass and let the tears fall silently, uncontrollably. She cried like someone who sees their soul outside their body, like someone who finds the peace they thought they had lost forever. She's so small, she whispered, without realizing she had said it out loud. Mary approached slowly, looked around, took a deep breath and said, Go in for a few minutes. Just 2. Carla's eyes widened. Can I? Go. She entered as if crossing into another world. She took 3 slow steps to the edge of the bed. She knelt beside her daughter. Her face was falling apart. She said nothing. She just ran her hand carefully through the girl's tangled hair. Then she brushed her lips very softly on the cold forehead. She closed her eyes. Mommy's here, she whispered, almost without a voice. Mommy's here, my love. She remained silent, and then right there, in that quiet room, something happened. One of the girl's fingers moved almost imperceptibly, a slow but real movement, as if she knew, as if she were saying, I hear you, I recognize you. Carla looked at Mary in shock. Mary put her hand to her chest, surprised. She moved, said Carla, her voice broken. I saw it, replied Mary, her eyes filled with tears. Time stood still. The sound of the machines remained the same. The night continued outside. But inside that room, a mother's silent love had managed to transcend everything. Pain, distance, guilt, silence. It had touched the deepest place in a little girl. And even without a single word, Gabriella responded. Early the next day, Mary knocked on the door of the hospital administration office. Her eyes were marked by a bad night's sleep, but her voice was firm and determined. We need a social worker. Today, it was not a request. It was a call. And a few hours later, she herself welcomed a middle-aged woman with an attentive gaze and a clipboard in her hands into the hallway. Doña Lorena, one of those professionals who don't smile foolishly, but who know how to listen with their whole body. Mary explained everything. The case, the details, the call, the search, the reunion, and asked with her heart in her hand that Carla be given the opportunity to speak. She's not perfect. She's broken, but she loves her daughter. I saw it, and the girl reacted to her touch. It was no coincidence. Doña Lorena nodded silently and made the appointment for that afternoon. In a small room in the hospital, with an old wooden table, 2 chairs, and a small bottle of water on the table, Mary stayed outside, waiting out of respect, but with her heart in her hands. Inside, Carla was trembling, not from cold, but from fear. She was sitting on the edge of her chair, her hands clasped in her lap, as if trying to stay steady. The social worker opened the conversation calmly, without judgment. "Carla, I just want to hear your truth. You don't have to embellish anything, but it's important that you trust me." Carla nodded with her eyes downcast. I just don't want to lose my daughter. I know I was wrong. I know I hid her. But it wasn't out of malice, it was fear. It was desperation." Doña Lorena took notes, but she also observed her face. Every pause, every held-back tear. "Do you have a place to live today?" "No, just what I'm wearing." "Have you sought help before?" "I did, but they kicked me out. They called me unstable. No one really wanted to listen, so I stopped trying. Will you accept help now?" Carla took a deep breath. The first tear rolled down her cheek. "Yes, I'll accept it. For her, for my Gabriela." At the end of the conversation, Doña Lorena left the room and called Mary. "She's going to need psychological care, a temporary shelter, and she'll have to prove every day that she can take care of her daughter. But I'm not going to take that away from her." Mary felt her chest fill with emotion. "So we're going to recommend conditional foster care, and we're going to stay very close." Mary looked into the room. Carla had her head down, drying her eyes with her sleeve. She looked small, vulnerable, but alive. Doña Lorena put away her clipboard, turned around, and said, "No one deserves to be punished for falling if they still have the strength to get up." Dawn arrived, laden with silence and a cold that penetrated to the bone even inside the hospital. Mary was in the medication room when the intercom rang. "It was from the ICU," she answered, and just by hearing the first sentence from the nurse on duty, she knew something was wrong. Gabriela's oxygen saturation is dropping. Her breathing is becoming irregular. Mary's heart raced. She dropped everything and ran. She rushed down the hallways like someone running in a nightmare. When she entered the room, she saw the monitors flashing red. A continuous sound filled the air. The doctor on duty was there trying to adjust the equipment, increasing the oxygen flow. But Gabriela's body looked weaker. Her chest rose and fell with effort. Her little hands trembled slightly. Mary ran to the bedside and placed her hand on the girl's forehead. It was cold, too cold. "Please, not now," she whispered, almost without a voice. "Hang on, my flower, hang on." But everything pointed to a serious relapse. The doctor shook her head with concern. "Her lungs are fighting, but they're getting tired." Mary looked at Gabriela. It seemed like she was slipping away again, just like that night. Only now it was crueler because she had already come back. She had already cried. She had already felt her mother's touch. And then Mary said aloud what her heart was screaming. She needs her mom. At that very moment, she left the ICU and ran to the temporary accommodation where Carla was staying inside the hospital with the social worker's permission. She knocked loudly on the door. "Carla, wake up. She's getting worse. Come now." Carla opened the door, frightened, her eyes red from not sleeping well for days. She put on her coat and ran downstairs with Mary in silence, her heart in her hands. When they reached the ICU, Carla stopped at the door. Her eyes widened when she saw her daughter with tubes, machines, her face pale, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Go to her," said Mary. Carla entered slowly, her feet almost floating, stood next to the bed, took her daughter's little hand in hers, kissed it, and then began to sing, a soft lullaby, mixed with whispers, an old melody of the kind sung in one's arms. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "Go to sleep, my little girl. Sleep, my sunshine. Sleep, peace of my heart." Mary leaned against the wall and let the tears flow. The doctor looked at the monitor, and then the sound changed. The line that went up and down became more stable. Her breathing became more rhythmic. Her oxygen saturation rose slowly, but it rose. Carla continued singing with her eyes closed, her face wet with tears, as if that song were the last thread between her and her daughter. And perhaps it was, because that night, it wasn't the medicine, it wasn't the machine, it was the mother. It was her presence, her voice, her scent, the melody of the one who gave life, loved, lost, and returned. And Gabriela unconsciously felt it and decided to stay. The early morning was dense, heavy, one of those times when even silence hurts your ears. The dim light of the ICU and pediatric ward barely illuminated the room. It left only a soft glow on the edges of the sheet. The sound of the machines remained constant, but now, calmly, with a steady, stable rhythm. Carla was sitting next to the bed with her body hunched over, her head resting on the mattress, holding her daughter's arm with both hands. She hadn't slept, she just stayed there, whispering quiet words, sometimes just breathing, her face swollen from crying so much. The clock on the wall read 3:47. It was at that moment that Mary entered slowly and quietly. She was carrying a blanket for Carla, but she stopped as soon as she crossed the threshold. The room was silent until a sound appeared faint, scratchy, a thread. "Mom, didn't you forget me?" Mary stood motionless. The blanket fell to the floor. Carla raised her head slowly as if she were hearing a dream. Her eyes opened wide. She looked toward the bed and then saw Gabriella with her eyes open, small, tired, but alive. The girl's mouth trembled, her lips dry and cracked, but the question had come out. A question that seemed to carry all the pain in the world. "Mom, you didn't forget me, did you?" Carla brought her hands to her mouth. I am," came out stuck, painful, and she collapsed. "Never, my love, never," she said, leaning slowly toward her daughter's face. Tears flowed like a river. She kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hair. "I thought I had lost you. I thought I would never see you again, but I never forgot you. I never left you. I tried to come back, but I was stopped, choked up from crying so much." Gabriella looked at her mother with those small but full eyes, and although weak, almost without strength, she gently squeezed her mother's finger. Mary, standing there watching the scene, could only hold back her emotions with her hands on her chest. It was like watching a broken world come back together again, piece by piece, without shouting, without celebration, without any apparent miracle, just love, naked, painful, true. Forgiveness did not come in words. It came in the look, in the touch, in the tear, in the silence between mother and daughter, who knew what it was like to be too far apart and yet not let go. And there, in that cold dawn, in that room full of wires and machines, something happened, something bigger than any medicine, bigger than any judgment. Reconnection, reunion, forgiveness, which does not need to be asked for, because it already is, because it is already there, because it never left. The morning sun came through the infirmary window with a delicacy that had not been seen for days. Without a ray of light, it crossed the room, illuminating the face of Gabriella, who was now breathing on her own, without tubes, her mouth slightly open, like someone learning to live again. Carla was sitting next to the bed with a discreet smile on her lips. Mary watched from the doorway without being seen. She held a folder with papers in one hand, and with the other her chest, because that's where it hurt. But now, in a good way, the social worker had found temporary shelter for Carla and Gabriella. A simple but safe place, a clean room, a warm bed, bathroom, food, and most importantly, dignity. "Are you willing to start over? You will soon have a hearing with the judge. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of her, and stay well." "Okay," Mary had asked her the day before, and Carla, with a steady gaze, replied, "Not for me, for her, just for her. I accept everything." And so, with the support of the hospital and social services, they began to reorganize their lives. Mary accompanied them closely. She went to the shelter in her free time between shifts. She brought fruit, medicine, clean clothes, and without realizing it, she became part of the routine of the two. Gabriella was also slowly coming back to herself, still fragile, yes, but with a light in her eyes that had not been there before. The first time she said a complete sentence, Carla almost fell off her chair. "Mom, can I draw?" Carla cried, as if she were hearing music for the first time, and the smile was shy, crooked, but it was there. It was small, but when it appeared it seemed to light up the whole room. One day Mary arrived and found her sitting on the bed with a colored pencil in her hand, scribbling a sun, 2 little houses, and 3 little monkeys holding hands. "Who are these here?" Mary asked. Gabriella looked and pointed slowly. "Me, Mom, You." Mary felt the ground disappear for a moment. The girl looked at her sweetly. Then, without saying anything, she rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Mother's shoulder. It was the beginning of a new start. There was no rush, no celebration. It was in its own time, but it was real. It was alive. And now they were no longer alone. Night fell silently over Puebla. Mary's shift had been lighter, but her heart was still beating. Not with anguish, but with memories. When she got home, Mary hung her robe behind the door, calmly took off her shoes, turned on only the kitchen light, made herself a cup of warm tea, sat down in the wooden chair that always creaked a little, and stayed there staring into space. The silence in the house was the same as always, but that the night seemed deeper, fuller. After a few minutes, she got up slowly and went to the guest room, the only one she had kept closed for years. She opened the door carefully. The air there smelled like thyme. The walls were clean, but there was something in the air that only the heart can feel. Absence. She went to the closet, bent down, and carefully pulled out a cardboard box. It had always been there. She had never had the courage to open it after closing it. But now it was different. She removed the lid with her already trembling hands. Inside the box were the photos. The first one she picked up was of a 6-year-old girl with her hair tied back with 2 colored rubber bands, a crooked smile, a missing tooth, running on the sand at the beach. "Clara," Mary whispered, her voice broken. She ran her finger over her daughter's face. The photo was yellowed at the edges, and Mary's heart at that moment felt as if that smiling face was still there, alive, running, shouting, "Mommy, look at me," at the seashore. But the sea had taken her away, and with her, Mary had stopped loving. At least she stopped loving children. She closed the door on her pain, built walls inside. She never allowed herself to love again. She never let herself care for anyone the way she had before. Until now. She took out another photo. Clara asleep on the couch, hugging a teddy bear, the light from the TV reflected on her face. Mary smiled through her tears, then lowered her head and cried softly. But it wasn't just sadness. It was reunion. It was as if she were finally saying to herself, "You can love again." Gabriela had reopened a door that she swore was closed forever. And there, in that cold dawn, between memories and silence, Mary understood. She hadn't saved Gabriela alone. Gabriela had also saved her from a void that she no longer knew how to name. The day of the hearing arrived with cloudy skies. Mary got up early, put on her cleanest white clothes, tied her hair back tightly, and took a deep breath in front of the mirror. It was as if her own body knew that this day was different. It wasn't just another appointment. It was the moment when 2 people's lives could change or be broken again. Carla also arrived early at the courthouse. She wore a blouse borrowed from the shelter and held Gabriela's hand tightly, who was already walking on her own, although still with timid steps. The girl carried a drawing in her bag, said nothing, just looked everywhere, squeezing her mother's fingers tightly. In the courtroom, the judge was a serious man with small, tired eyes. At his side, an assistant from the juvenile court took notes. The doctor and Mary were there, sitting together. They weren't required to go, but they wanted to. They needed to. The judge asked Carla to tell her story. She spoke without embellishment, without exaggeration. She talked about the mistakes, the abandonment, the pain, the guilt. But she also spoke of love, of reunion, of the desire to do things right. She didn't cry. She just spoke the truth. Her voice trembled, but was steady. Then the doctor handed over the reports. Mary handed over her own handwritten statement in her firm but sensitive handwriting. She said that Carla was present, attentive, and that Gabriela showed signs of improvement every time her mother was near. She said that for the first time in a long time, she saw hope in the girl's eyes. The judge read Ishri Maj's line calmly. He looked at Carla, then at Gabriela, then at Mary. "Do you believe this mother is capable of caring for her daughter?" he asked her directly. Mary did not hesitate. "I believe that no one in this room has the right to say no. What she needs is support, guidance, time, and I believe that you will do everything that is necessary." The judge was silent for a few seconds, then took a deep breath, picked up his pen, and said, Custody is maintained. The mother will remain with her daughter under mandatory psychological guidance. The shelter will remain indefinitely, and the hospital will provide social support until the next review. Carla put her hand to her mouth. Mary gently squeezed her leg as if to say, "We did it." Gabriella leaned back on her mother's lap and took the drawing out of her pocket. She handed it to the judge without saying a word. It was her mother, and Mary, the three of them holding hands under a sunny, cloudy sky. The judge looked at it. He smiled for the first time that day, and in that simple, childish drawing was the future that was beginning there. A future with stumbles, yes, but with presence, with truth, with a bond. The bond that had almost been broken one day, but was now stitched back together by love. The afternoon sun lit up the shelter's courtyard with a lightness that matched the moment. On that simple Thursday, Carla decided to prepare a small celebration. A cupcake, juice, some cookies, a flowered tablecloth spread over a makeshift table. Nothing big, but for someone who had nothing left, that was a lot. It was everything. She herself called Mary. "You can come. It's just a cupcake. Gabriella really wanted you to come." Mary left everything, without thinking twice. She arrived at the shelter with a discreet smile, her hair tied back any old way, and a bag with 3 colored balloons. Nothing planned, just heart. Upon entering, she saw Carla with a calm look on her face, and saw Gabriella standing next to the table in a little flowered dress, holding a folded piece of paper in her hands. The girl ran towards Mary and grabbed her hand tightly. Mary bent down, looking into the girl's eyes, and that's when she heard a soft but clear voice say, "You're my second mom." Mary froze inside. A shiver ran down her spine. She didn't know what to say. She just felt her eyes fill with tears, and held the girl's hand even more affectionately. "Thank you, my love, thank you." Then Gabriella handed him the paper, a drawing made with colors, 3 figures, a woman with her hair down, Carla, a girl in a dress, herself, and a woman in a white coat, Mary, the 3 of them holding hands, with hearts around them, and a very large sun above. But what made Mary break down was the phrase written in a child's crooked handwriting at the bottom. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't breathe." She pressed the paper against her chest and cried shamelessly, without fear. She cried truly, as if washing her soul. Carla came over, put her hand on her shoulder, said nothing, just stood there, the 3 of them together. 3 women from different times, with broken stories, but now connected. In that simple shelter without luxuries, without anything, there was an abundance that no big house can give. Recognized love, love that saves, love that sees, even in the darkness, even without air. And it was only the beginning. The hospital was full that early morning, one of those long, heavy shifts where fatigue seems to accumulate not only in the body, but also in the soul. Mary, her eyes marked and her gown already wrinkled, walked slowly through the corridors, carrying another white sheet in her hands. In the room next to the emergency room, a body was waiting to be taken away. It was an elderly man, with no family, the victim of a sudden heart attack. Mary did everything as she always did, with care, respect, silence. She covered the body slowly, placed his hands on his chest and, as was her custom, whispered a short prayer before leaving the room. But that day, before leaving, something tugged at her heart. She walked slowly to the pediatric ward. The hallway was dark, with only the reception light on. The sounds of the early morning were low and muffled. Mary passed by the reception desk, nodded a good morning, and went to the last room on the right. She pushed the door open carefully. Inside, sitting on the bed, Gabriella was intently drawing a new picture. She was sitting cross-legged, her tongue in the corner of her mouth, concentrated. The sun was shining through the slits in the window, and the light hit the girl's hair like a soft, golden glow. When she saw Mary, she looked up and smiled timidly, but full of life, a smile that said more than any words could. "I'm drawing a little bird," she said, showing her the paper. Mary approached slowly, knelt down beside the bed, and looked at the drawing, which was simple with a child's strokes. But there was a little bird with very large wings, flying above 3 people holding hands. "It's you, Mom, and me," The little bird is watching over us." Mary smiled, and her eyes filled with tears. But this time, they were tears of peace. "It's beautiful, my love. It's so beautiful." They looked at each other for a second. Just that. A second filled with everything. And in that instant, Mary understood. Her life, once so full of unhealed pain, had found a new meaning. It wasn't something grand. It wasn't like in the movies. It was simple. It was being there, being seen, being needed, loving again. And in that quiet room, while the hospital was waking up outside, something was born that has no name. It can only be felt. It can only be lived. Gabriella went back to drawing. Mary got up, adjusted her gown, and walked out slowly, but with her chest full of life, full again. What if it were you? What if one early morning, in that heavy silence of the hospital, you heard a sigh coming from under a sheet? Would you have the courage to pull it back, to look again, to believe that there was still life, even though it seemed over? What if you were Gabriella's mother? Would you have come back? Could you forgive yourself? What part of this story moved you the most? If this story touched your heart as much as it touched ours, click the bell now so you don't miss the next videos. We only tell stories that transform, that move us, that remind us all of what really matters. Don't forget to check out the videos on the screen. Each one has its own story. See you in the next video.